Got it.
Okay, Erev Tov, everyone. First of all, I'm going to start off by repeating some points that we stressed in our previous session. Somebody in the background? Can I mute everyone? I guess I'll have to. Okay, good. Beseder. So I'm going to stress a few, repeat a few things that I stressed or pointed out in our previous sessions, including 2 weeks ago, and say the following. First of all, two things that I think make people afraid of. We're talking about the relationship between progressive issues and tradition. From the beginning of this specific series, Mark, who is hopefully joining a little later on, I told him he might be a bit late today, stressed that Judaism is very progressive. We always want to make the world better and make things improve on the one hand, and on the other hand, sometimes the world goes in directions that are not improvement, but are rather than helping us move forward, make us go backward. And we can, there's Mark, and we can discuss them and see what we can do about them. So what I want to say two things that concern people or scare people about progressive issues when it comes to Judaism and tradition. One of them is a fear that what you're doing is going to make everything fall apart. We are used to a certain setting, a certain way things are done. Some things are acceptable, some things are not acceptable. And when you move something on that board, there's fear that the whole thing is going to fall apart and we're going to be left without Judaism, without boundaries. And one way of relating to that or dealing with that is to understand that it's not inevitable that when we move one pawn, everything has to move. It is possible that we can move one thing and other things remain in place. It is possible that we remove one detail and there are basic principles that remain in place, and we can consider, we can give thought and time to consider and process to consider a change that maybe is not moving everything the way it seems to be right at the beginning. The other issue is it something that the Torah says is prohibited? People tend to say, well, then it's impossible. It can't be. People are just making it up. If we go back to gay, lesbian issues that we discussed in previous sessions, it can't be. It's impossible that Hashem created a person whose true sexual inclination is a homosexual or lesbian, and then Hashem says to him that it's prohibited. It's impossible. It can't be. So obviously, since I believe in the Torah, so obviously the person is making it up, and they should just work harder to get out of it, and it's impossible that that's the true situation. I don't agree with that. I think that there are questions. Sometimes I have questions. Sometimes I don't understand everything, and I have to say for me personally, I have spent time and efforts on the issues of homosexuality and being homosexual or lesbian, meeting with people, talking with people. I know a lot of people, and I'm personally, I'm convinced that it really does exist. There are people that's the way they're born. And then, of course, somebody will stress, and we mentioned this in the previous sessions, that, yeah, but when you accept that there are people who aren't really, and it comes easy to them, and they don't have to deal with it and so on, which is also true, but I can't deny the people who, for whom it's serious, who have tried for years not to be this way, but this is what happens. At the end of the day, that's who they are. And I have a question. And for them, it's a much, much, much more burdensome question. It's a terrible burden on their shoulders and their soul to believe in Hashem, to believe in the Torah, and then to find themselves in a situation where they say to Hashem, you created me, and you told me that I have certain powers and certain desires, and I have no avenue in which I can carry out my life in a permissible or positive way that's a very difficult situation to be in, and I don't necessarily right now have an answer to that question, but I believe that I can live with questions in Emunah and not have the answers to the questions, and that doesn't mean that because there's a question that right now I haven't found the answer to, that the answer is A or B. Either way, it means that I should continue thinking through this issue. Another thing I'd like to stress is that there are two mitzvot in the Torah. One mitzvah relating to these issues that we're raising. The Torah prohibits two men to engage in sexual intercourse between them, and at the same time, a person reports, lives, feels that he is born with this inclination. And when I see that, there are two mitzvot that I see. One of them is that this is prohibited. The other mitzvah is ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. What would I want? How would I want someone to relate to me if I was in his shoes? And therefore, we have to relate with compassion and not behaving in a way that is disrespectful, that is hurtful, and that is condescending, and all kinds of things like that. We have to be sensitive to the people, and the people are in a very sensitive situation, and we do have to be sensitive to that. And those are two mitzvot in the Torah. If we go to today's issue of transgenders, the Torah, there are two prohibitions that we can mention in the Torah. One is for men to dress, look like women, women to dress, look like men. We should keep some a separation in the external appearance of men and women in the society. And the other is, which is going even further, is if a person goes through sex change, transition, then that's the Torah, in the halakha, it's prohibited to cause damage to reproduction, to sexual organs. And so that's another prohibition in the Torah. At the same time, once again, if this is what the person is experiencing, if this is their life experience, I cannot ignore it and just say, yell at them, it's prohibited, or like I'm in a demonstration yelling Shabbos. So I have to be sensitive to the person, and that's also something we have to be aware of, keeping this complexity of the two sides. Where do we draw the line? That's a good question. We mentioned that last week as well. But there are certain things that we should interfere and try to change. Where do we draw the line of where we interfere and try to influence that person? That's a different question. Another thing I mentioned, and I'm repeating, is that I believe that dafka, no good word in English for dafka, religious people who are also open to looking into certain modern values and considering, can we accept them or can we not accept them? We may have an advantage over the other two extremes, those who, when they see something in the Torah and it seems to them that it clashes with something modern, they immediately reject the modern attitude. And the other extreme of those who, no matter what, whatever you say goes, whatever you want, whatever you feel, everybody can do their thing, and nobody can say anything to anyone, and nobody can demand or expect from anyone to have any boundaries in place. Those two extremes are not trying to look to understand the issue, to look into, is there some complexity here? Is there some kind of complex attitude that we can put in place relating to these issues? And I believe that Afka religious people are willing to think about the issues, might have deeper attitudes to contribute to the world in the long run, even if right now, in 2023, I don't have all those answers. But I believe that if we continue to deal with them honestly and with compassion, then we might come up with something that's significant for us and for the world in the long run. For me personally, as I said, I've dealt in a pretty intensive way with lesbian and homosexual issues, a lot less with trans. It's a lot more challenging for me. And so right now I'm not coming with any absolute attitude, but But I would say, as we've said this before also, we don't have to go to an extreme. We don't have to reject people. We don't have to accept every behavior. And we don't have to take our acceptance to an extreme. Meaning, it's one thing to accept a person, which we're going to discuss in a moment. It's one thing to accept a person who reports, this is who I am, this is honestly who I am. There's one thing to accept, I don't have proof of it, but maybe it's true that there is such a thing as gender dysphoria, that a person is born male or female body, but in their personality, there is this dysphoria, this lack of it doesn't make sense, but body and personality and soul are not in the same gender, and it's possible that it exists. I certainly can't say it's impossible that it exists. I can't prove that it does exist, but I can't prove that it doesn't exist. I can't say to the person, well, you're making it up, just forget about it, it's nonsense. And I can accept the person, and that doesn't mean that we have to take the whole world to a place where there are no genders, where every child should be told, we don't know if you're male or female. You know, most people in the world are still growing up, maturing, and discovering that they don't have dysphoria, that the gender of the physical gender that they're born in is also the gender of their personality. And we don't have to confuse the whole world and everybody start from scratch and see what you're going to get to. We don't have to assume that just as an example, that all bathrooms in the world should be mixed, because who said that male is male and female is female? We don't have to go to that extreme if we accept a person who reports, who feels that he has this dysphoria. It doesn't mean the whole world has to behave that way. And we can look for other points of balances, or the other issue is, for instance, I think you mentioned this, Michael, in one of the previous times we almost spoke about this, but didn't give it the whole time. Like in sports, it doesn't make sense that a man who transed to female then competes in female sports, or a man who reports, I have a male body, but I feel like I'm a woman, so I'm going to compete in female sports. That's not respectful of women who are born in female bodies and want to compete in their sports and so on. So it doesn't mean accepting individuals in unusual situations does not mean that the whole world has to be kind of turned upside down and everything has to work that way. So these are some points. And now I'd like to go to this case that I told you I wrote before. I did not plan this. I am a member of a certain committee it's one of the educational circles that deals with sexual issues and how we should handle them in the schools and the school system and things like that. And we had a meeting this past Wednesday, and I didn't know exactly what the meeting was about. And this woman, Liat, I sent the link to the article before, and the mother of this child, this woman, Liat, came and gave a presentation. She gives it very powerfully. Her profession is not being an actor. Maybe it is. She's a teacher. Maybe all teachers are a little bit actors, but she puts on an amazing act which expresses her experience as a mother in a very expressive way, in a very impressive way. Her son had all kinds of difficulties, including putting himself in dangerous situations, and was hospitalized in a mental institution because of it. And it turned out, when they finally found out a few years ago, I think she is now 18 or 19, I think 19. I think the video on in that article was maybe from a year ago, at age 18, and now at age 19. And somewhere around 15, I think, they discovered, or this child said to the mother, it's just, what can I say? I'm a girl, I'm not a boy. And the parents, the mother especially, in the long run, also the father, accepted this child. Said, I'll accept you for whatever you are. She describes the whole process, how they went through it. They live in a religious yeshuv in Bnei Darom, which is near Ashdod. and how, for instance, she tells the story, and this woman describes herself, presents herself as someone who keeps halakha, and it's very important for her. And she says, I am not doing anything against halakha. Maybe my son/daughter is, but maybe she has no choice. And one, what in the end, or after some time, they let the word get out in their yeshuv, in their where they're living. She went around actually family after family to discuss it with them because she didn't want it going around in a negative way. The rabbi came over, and she was very afraid of what the rabbi was going to say. And the rabbi, I don't know who he is. I could probably find out. That's not what's important right now. The rabbi said to them, said to the parents, your mission, your responsibility is to keep your child alive. Meaning, because of this dysphoria, there's a danger. There are higher numbers of suicide, of attempts of suicide, amongst also gay, lesbians, but also amongst even more amongst transgenders. And your mission is to keep your child alive, and therefore support the child. Pikuach nefesh. And not to say I don't care, but this is a life-threatening situation. This is a life and death situation, and we can't just overlook it and say, well, it's forbidden according to the Torah, therefore let's fight against this child, and this child is putting himself in a life-threatening situation. And these are some of the stories that they told. And then if you see the video in the article, the video that's brought in the article that I sent the link before, you see the mother and son who is now in the process of becoming male to female. It's a long process. One of the things they said, Ilana, in that podcast, you must have heard that, was that a few years ago in Israel, to make a physical sex change, you have to go through a certain committee. And a couple of years ago, there were about 20 such people who approached the committee a year. And now it's about 300 a year. Now, is that because we have opened something we shouldn't have opened? And now people are coming there just because it's popular, it's intriguing, it doesn't, I don't know, to me it doesn't sound like anything someone would want to do if they don't have to. Or is it something that in the past people didn't even consider that it's a possibility and therefore never came forward? How did they live their lives for all the decades that they were alive?
Did you freeze?
I don't know. But these are the numbers. These are the statistics of the world that we live in, which is probably still a little lower in some.
In the podcast, they said also.
One second, please. Sorry, I muted everyone just so that some people don't notice, and then you can unmute yourself and speak.
In the
yes,
podcast, they said that there was something like a 4 to 5 year wait for the surgery, that if anybody was going through that.
Yes, the mother mentioned that also, in the meeting that we had with her also.
And they also said that there's only one hospital that's engaged in it, and there's really only one MD that's involved in that kind of surgical procedure. So all of that also explains the long wait. And so
Ilana, let me just add one thing, and then we'll open up to discussion for everyone. I want to say also the following. I also saw an article by a woman, not Jewish, not Israeli, who in the past was in favor of these kind of surgical procedures, as you say, and continued to research, and claims now that they were too enthusiastic to do it in the past, and it causes a lot of damage and leaves people with a lot of negative things that they should never have gotten into. I would say personally the following. I think it's we're still very young on these issues. We don't know very much. We don't know the results of a lot of things. I think on the one hand, we should be compassionate. And I agree with the rabbi who said it's pikuach nefesh. And we should be very careful. At the same time, decisions should be made very slowly and carefully, in spite of the fact that when we do that, we may also be causing someone's pain and suffering to be longer, but we also don't want to, you don't want people jumping, making one sex change, then trying to go back the other way because they feel they made a mistake. It has to be done very, very slowly and carefully. I don't think we know enough about this yet, but I do think we have to sense it with sensitivity and with an open mind and with boundaries. I think that is what the Torah would tell us to do. If I look at the two sides that I mentioned before, the two mitzvot, one of them is to try and keep within certain boundaries, not let things get out of hand and just everybody does whatever they want. I think that is never what the Torah is telling us. On the other hand, the Torah is telling us to be compassionate, to understand, to try and understand what's driving a person, and where it is truly pikuach nefesh, where it's truly pikuach nefesh, then I can't say to a person, well, so you'll die or you'll commit suicide. What can I do? The Torah said you can't do this. So we have to be very sensitive on many fronts, and not to run quickly forward as if we understand everything and we know what's best. People who know what's best very quickly at one extreme or the other, I'm very extreme at rejecting that. And Bevakasha, now Ilana, you wanted to say something further, and Tova and other people who want to speak up, please, now is the time to do so. So Ilana, you want to say something further? Okay, Tova, Bevakasha.
What's the question of hatalat mum?
I agree, but lechatchila certainly not. But look, this young man, woman, young man who's in the process of transitioning male to female, whose name as a boy was Yair, and her name now is Shachar. She, and I even understand it's difficult for us to see because she today at 19 or 18 in the movie still looks very masculine, but with long hair and makeup and so on. And her arm is full of scratches from the times that she was inflicting pain upon herself because of her suffering, his suffering at the time. But it also has a tattoo that says hope, because he was in pain, inflicting pain upon himself, scratching himself in ways that, yes, the Torah would prohibit, but was also looking for hope. Would I say that it's permissible to make a tattoo? Very clearly, explicitly forbidden in the Torah. Can I say that making a tattoo is pikuach nefesh, that you very much want to, and therefore I should permit it because of pikuach nefesh? If a tattoo is pikuach nefesh for someone, I don't know, I would need an expert in mental health to tell me that it's actually pikuach nefesh. It could be. I'm not saying it's impossible. It could be. And for this person, maybe it's pikuach nefesh, but I wouldn't run there too quickly. So certainly I wouldn't, it's a mum, I agree, but it's worse than a mum because it's causing damage to reproduction organs. That's certainly against halacha. At the same time, if it's pikuach nefesh, I don't want to kill anyone. So, those are the two sides. And how well do I know exactly where I am and when, on one or the other? And I would encourage each and every one of us to think about it as if it's your child, just like this mother is projecting it. I'm not running there, I'm not encouraging it, but if it's my child, would I reject the child? I don't think so. Mark, bevakasha.
Just very briefly, you're doing something very unusual, Rabbi, here these days, for people these days. You're actually saying, be moderate. Look at things with moderation. Doing something very unusual.
I'm an extremist, I know.
Kol hakavod.
Thank you.
No, Rabbi, there's another perspective as well.
I'm sorry, Evan?
There's another perspective on the
Okay.
issue. If you take the aspect of mutilation of the body, and let's call it even a reconstruction of the body, we also need to consider what about the person that may one day meet this person that's been reconstructed and be deceived as to the origin of the person and the actual true gender, you know. And if you think about the damage that can be done to that person that meets a person and is kind of falsified in his initial impression and may even commit a sexual act with that person, the damage that that other person, the third party, has suffered is like immeasurable on both sides, from a man and a woman. So there's an aspect here of deception. It's a cosmetic deception, because at the end of the day, the genes of a male will be, I think it's XY, and a female will be XX. And if you come in 300 years and you dig up the body and there's archaeology, they're going to say, well, this was a male, if it's an XY. And I believe, in my opinion, that from the Torah's perspective, it's a male, despite a doctor performing a certain procedure on it. So it's kind of, if you look at it from this perspective, there's an issue of deception and an issue of a cosmetic mask of the true reality.
Rabbi, if I could just pipe in here, I actually think that with all due respect, with the concept of someone who's transitioning, it's very, very rare for someone who's transitioning to not disclose that they're transgendered. It's not a deception that someone is at all interested in committing against another, because they've gone through this massive road where they, you know, close the world off to who they really are. By the time they find themselves and they actually go through the process of having, let's say, not just, you know, transgendered from an exterior perspective, but they go through a whole, you know, surgical situation. It's so radical to think that there is this massive, group of people who, let's say, are transgendered and then are deceiving. They are so finally coming into their own that they say, I am transition male to female.
So I know of somebody that didn't
Yes.
happen.
Correct. And they do, but it's a rare. So you can't.
This person that had a sexual relationship with a person that had transgendered was told by his friends that this was the case. So it does happen. It's
right. I mean, this is the same argument that you could use for any group of people. You could say that, you know, Jews, you know, I'm going to be radical, say steal because you have a Madoff. You can't take that singular person and say the group does. But it is a danger. It is a danger.
It's a danger, and it's a terrible danger. That's what I'm trying to. It's a horrific danger.
I would like to. I'd like to start off with the end of what you said, Evan, about the halachic question. I have to say that I'm not prepared, but the halachic question statistically is going to come my way, meaning someone is going to come into shul who was born physical gender male and has transited to female and is going to come into the women's section, or someone is going to walk into shul who did the opposite transition. How do, you know, there are halachic questions. I mean, we're going to not relate right now to the restrictions in halakha on women, which is a totally different discussion. But as long as they're in place, someone who transited from female to male, okay, now do we halachically treat them as halachically with the rights of men in halakha or the rights of women in halakha? This is a tremendous question which has to be dealt with halachically. And I'm not even sure right now what the answers are. I mean, it has begun to be dealt with in the halachic world, in the rabbinic world, but I'm assuming it's going to come my way at some point, our way and my way at some point, and I'm going to ask for help. Thank God I have a group of friends who are have that same trait, Mark, that you mentioned before, of being moderate and dealing with these kinds of issues in both with a Torah scholarship and with with the opening themselves to possibilities of what the halakha would be. But yeah, we will have to deal with it. That's one question. Halakha is one question. The health and the life of the person is another question. And what I'm suggesting, Evan, is that there is certainly, I agree with you, archaeologically, when they dig up, I mean, hopefully, person lives to 120 and is buried, and their grave is in place forever, and nobody digs it up. But when they find some archaeological find, they will find that this person was the gender, the physical gender that they were born with. Correct. But does that mean that the dysphoria that they experience is not also a real experience that their personality, that their neshama is going through, and it's a very difficult experience. And therefore, I would, I'm not in their shoes to understand the experience or to tell them that they're wrong for experiencing this experience. And if here's a big question that I don't know the answer to. If we find medication, and we've tried that with homosexual and lesbian, and it didn't work, caused a lot of damage to people. But if we find a medication that can solve the dysphoria and put them back mentally in the gender that they are physically, is that a proper thing to do or improper thing to do is a very intricate question to my mind. But the issue of deceiving someone is, yes, it would be terrible, but it's not the only way one can deceive another person. And if it's truly a pikuach nefesh question for one's personality, I don't think I can ask them not to do it, because there is a percentage that would act in such deceit.
Right.
I would need them to, to take upon themselves to be open about it, to be clear about it. Certainly something to consideration.
I just, in terms of the halachic issues that I've come across, I've known of cases where somebody has transitioned female to male and then becomes a halachic question for minyan. So the person would stay, which you really have to have, just like you want somebody to respect us in the LGBTQ community, we have to respect the religious community also. So I'm hearing that the answer that some of the female to males are saying is, thank you for letting me stay on this side of the mechitza. Don't count me for the 10. So it's an interesting dynamic.
Or at least, I don't know that that's in the long run. I don't know what the Sanhedrin's answer will be to the question.
Right.
But at least for now, come into shul and say, this is, for the first time someone gets to know you. We have had a time in shul, we have made the mistake of giving an aliyah to someone who had not converted, because someone new came into shul. We're very keen on giving an aliyah to guests.
Okay.
So
Right.
this guy comes in, we give him an aliyah, and afterwards we discover that he's in the beginning of a process of conversion. And he probably didn't even know that he should say, no, I'm not Jewish,
Should
don't
say
give me an
something.
aliyah.
Yeah.
But and then we learned that maybe we have to ask, you don't usually ask. A guy comes into
Right.
shul, you don't usually ask him, hey, are you Jewish? Most people walk into shul.
Right.
And in
Jewish.
this
So
case,
we made that mistake. Okay, I'd rather make that mistake once than not give aliyot to guests. But if I can prevent the mistake, I should make an effort to prevent the mistake. And if like you say, Shlomit, if I'm the person, then I should respect the community that I walk into.
The kahal.
If I want to go to a place where they don't care, man or woman, everyone gets aliyot, I can do that. I can choose to do that.
Right.
If I go to an Orthodox shul where they give aliyot to men and not to women, then it's my responsibility to respect them and say, this is who I am.
Agreed. Agreed.
But still, it's this is the balance and the complexity of putting the pieces
Right.
together. Michael, you're on mute, Michael.
Okay. This has been so simple, I want to make it more complex.
Oh, thank you.
So physicians, when they come into the field, are always asked to take on the concept of first, do no harm. Whatever you do, don't try not to make things worse.
Okay.
And that's true no matter what you practice. In surgery, it's true. I have a brother who's a psychiatrist. he has had to deal with these issues as well. Dealing with depression and the risk of suicide is probably the most difficult thing that he does. When we say we need to do certain things for pikuach nefesh, the question comes up, how do you stratify? What is the risk? Yes, there's a risk of people trapped in this situation to feel hopeless. And as we saw with that video, that poor young person has all these cuts on their arm. There's a condition that children especially attempts at suicide, we don't know. But the problem here is that there is a very significant suicide risk after transition. That does not go away. This is not necessarily a curative operation for that condition. There are programs around the world, in England, for example, that have put a complete hold on this because they're not seeing the results that they thought they would. In America, it's become almost come one, come all, and let's go find some other people. And we're going to see some really big problems from that.
Agreed.
I'm
In
sorry,
Israel,
can
it
you
sounds
explain?
like
I'm not familiar with the terminology that you used. Can you explain a little bit more about what you said about America?
America has made this such a positive sounding thing to do. And I know of people, and I've read a number of articles where people will go in to see a doctor and say, I'm having these feelings, can you help me? And they say, yeah, your surgery is scheduled next week. I mean, they just move right along. And there's been some harm from that, for sure. So I like the fact that you're telling us that the Israeli group is taking their time and going slow and trying to be full. I'll stop there.
I think that thank you, Michael. And there is, as I said, it's, and as you said, let's make it more complicated. It's on the one hand, yes, there is an advantage to taking things slowly. On the other hand, sometimes it's too long and dragged out. But I don't think there is any easy solution or kind
No.
of what do you call it? What's the word? I always look for this word and I'm missing it in English. A nuskha, like a mathematical
Formula, a formula.
formula. Thank you. You always give it to me. There isn't a specific formula that will tell us exactly how slow and exactly how fast. But
There's even worse
yes,
than
I
that.
agree. I personally agree that I need your help. I'll schedule your surgery for next week is not a good idea.
And the real question is, who's the expert? Who
Nachon.
really knows?
And that's why I said we should go on a journey of serious research and gathering data for the next at least a couple of years before we run ahead with final conclusions.
Agree.
Eliezer,
Is there a process, a controlled process, the way there is in parallel for religious conversion?
I'm sorry?
Is there a process when somebody wants to, I'm sort of continuing Michael's statement in a kind of questioning way. If somebody wants to convert sex,
Oh,
they have to go through some procedure of speaking to psychologists and things like that.
mhm.
I'm sure they do, but I don't know the details.
Mhm.
And at least in Israel, or I would say, yes, but like I would say the following. Let me go back to the homosexual lesbian issue as an example, and then come back to transgender. If a young person discovers that they are homosexual or lesbian, and want to have treatment, I would not send them to someone who has a specific agenda that they want, a goal that they want to reach. They want this person, as Michael is saying, they want this person to be homosexual or lesbian, or they want to discourage it. I think a person who treats another person should want to help this person find the best, the healthiest life that he can or she can have in their life. On the other hand, I don't want to run forward and say, whatever you like, that's what I'm going to accept. And that's not, whatever you like on a certain day is not always the healthiest thing for every person. And there may be someone who feels a homosexual tendency and then discovers that, no, we're all on a like a scale, is that the right word?
Spectrum.
On a spectrum, thinking a spectrum. And to be heterosexual doesn't mean that a person is totally at the 100%. It could be that he's at the 90% or the 75%, and he's not homosexual. And sometimes he has some form of level of attraction to men, but it doesn't mean that he's homosexual. So, let a person, delve deeper into their own selves and then come to honest conclusions and not to jump the gun and run forward quickly because of one day or one experience or things like that. I would say the same for someone who's experienced this experience of being transgender. Let's look into it seriously and see where it's headed and not do anything too quickly. So I would ask a person who, first of all, people need to have a therapist, has to have the proper training, has to have a balanced attitude, has to be not deciding from day one what the conclusions are going to be. But the society also has to encourage that kind of attitude. And in a society that totally discourages it or totally encourages it without really looking at individuals and what their real needs are, I think is going to make more severe mistakes. Then we're also going to make mistakes, but I think their mistakes will be more severe than the mistakes that will be done when we take it slowly and respectfully and looking for truth and not looking for what I want the result to be. But yes, I believe people should go through some kind of getting help and accompaniment, having someone accompany them on their journey in an honest, loving, respectful, and open-minded way.
Rabbi?
Yes, Michael and Mark.
Again, just to make it even a little bit more complicated, because we haven't touched on this point, I think there's a big question that's coming up now, when to intervene if the decision is made to intervene, and should we have different rules for children versus adults? This person in the video that you sent out is now an adult, but there's a increasing amount of data that's being gathered on children whose parents have decided that that's what they should do, and they don't always decide that together. There's been some real conflict between mothers and fathers about how to treat a child. Should a child that couldn't agree for any other surgical procedure be allowed to do this?
Should there be an age? Should there be an age limit?
I think there should be. I think there should be. If sexual relations, consensual underage 17 or 18 is not considered consensual, that's less than making a sex sex transition. So certainly I agree with you. It should be. I think even rules should be about the time that it should take, meaning it doesn't have to take 4 years, but it shouldn't be done too quickly. And yes, at a young age, I would even say, even for the parents to decide when the child is young. A lot of times people report that they felt this from a very young age. Maybe they didn't even know it, give it a name or identify it. Also about homosexual and lesbian, also about transgender. A lot of times people report that they deep inside were aware of something at a very early age, but they didn't understand, or the world didn't know it at the time, whatever it is. But then at some point they discover what it is about themselves, but sometimes maybe not. but yeah, I would certainly say the world is, some parts of the world are running too fast to make these decisions at an early age. And I would certainly say we have, it's one thing to support a person and encourage them that they will be able, if it's really necessary, they will be able to do something in the future. But you know what? On the other hand, I'm certainly not an expert. How much have I experienced that? How much have I researched it? How much, if you go, it needs to be led by people who will be very, very knowledgeable with a lot of research and experience. And this is the world. Do I trust them? Like I said in last session also, if they come with an agenda and they perform their research, maybe they're going to find what they wanted to find. How much do I trust their research? These are all issues. But yes, I think we have to be careful and not run quickly forward, certainly with young children.
I think you
Before
also
they're-
have a medical, I think you also have a medical ethics issue because once you start changing the hormonal structure of children, I think you really create some issues with respect to growth and puberty and all, and those things just those don't get fixed. You know what I mean? So I think
Right.
absolutely that kind of early stage intervention is something that has to be involved with like a panel of people of medical ethics involved and doctors that explain to the
Right.
parents exactly what the outcome is of,
Mhm.
of these types of treatments so early on. I think, and also, I mean, a child, they say that a cerebral cortex for a kid isn't formed till they're even in their 20s. So, I mean, these kids are making these decisions at this age because they're feeling something. I think there's a lot to be said for, their lack of understanding of the consequences of their actions. So I think there's a lot in that.
And
Yeah.
as I said before, this woman who in the past was supportive of the sex change surgical intervention and then changed her mind because she saw the results of it years later that were very detrimental. So these are all things that have to be
Yeah.
taken into account and researched on a
Mhm.
very intense level before, and it's not going to
Right.
be easy. It's not. And at the end, 10, 20 years from now, we're going to have different researchers with different conclusions and arguing about it. But at least we have to try. Mark, you were going to say something before, and then Etta.
No, that's fine. A lot of this discussion, not all of it, but a lot of this discussion reminds me of, what we, not that I know this firsthand or in any detail, but what we make converts go through. It's a whole process. It needs a lot of preparation. It's not easy. We don't encourage it. You need a panel. It's a lot of learning. It's going to change your whole social environment. A lot of it has parallels to conversion to Judaism and also conversion to other religions. Just dunk once and you're done. And I wonder if there's some parallels if people can make use of some of these parallels to pave the road a little bit.
Very interesting comment. I will be thinking about that. I didn't think of that before, but just to quickly, off the top of my head, to take one point, is that strengthens what we were saying before. You're supposed to also warn a convert about the consequences of conversion. Meaning, if you're not Jewish and you don't keep a certain prohibition, good for you. You're not Jewish. You don't have to. If you convert and then you don't keep that prohibition, not that I am on the panel of Olam Haba and Hashem's judgment, but there are in the Torah all kinds of statements about punishment by God and things like that. So you don't just tell a person, oh, you want to be Jewish? Great. Like you said before, like Michael said before, it's a person comes and I want to be Jewish. Oh, we have an appointment with the Beit Din next week. No, we don't work that way. And we also give you an opportunity to understand what it's going to mean, how it's going to influence your life. At the same time, the Gemara that discusses conversion also has points where it says, but don't overdo it, because you're going to discourage the people who really are authentically interested and with all the right reasons to convert. So we have to have two hands. As the Gemara says, smol dochavi yamin mekarev. You have to have one hand that's kind of pushing back a little bit, and one hand that's embracing and encouraging and letting the person be aware of both sides. And in that way, maybe that's an analogy that we can use for this kind of thing. Etta.
Well, I noticed we have new people here this week. I still think like no one died and left me in charge, and I think that we're not the ones to judge and everything. But I also think in the discussion, gay doesn't necessarily mean trans. I mean, there are people that may feel attracted to another person of the same sex. And I had spoken about a young man that was a student of mine many years ago. And I could tell when he was very young that he was gay, and he is gay, but he is a man who is living with a man. And that's just how it is. He doesn't want an operation. Interestingly, his sister that I knew nothing about did go through a trans operation and everything as an adult. I think someone touched on this, when they're very young, and in the US right now, if a kid comes in and goes, I want to be a truck driver, and they're a girl, they go, you need an operation, and it's immediate, and they do damaging things that affects them in their sexual life later on, and in their life later on, when they decide, oh, I didn't really mean that. But I think that, those are things that you need to, I think there is, I don't know, a panel or whatever, but I think there needs to be an age thing. An 18, 19-year-old may be a better judge of who they want to be from now on. I don't know, at 18 or 19 I was, but I think that, you can't take children and do this to them and everything. I think that's an experiment. I don't think it's reality.
Right.
But again, I think it's not, you can do like plastic surgery, like I'd like to look younger. Is it going to make me feel any better? Is it going to make my knees not hurt next week? No, but I don't know.
They're working on that in science also.
But you just have to, but for relationships, if it's someone, people, you just have to love them like you would love anybody. And that's who they are. And you are not, no one died and left you to judge them. And, you hope that they're happy. You hope that their life will be fulfilled. And I mean, Jewishly, I don't think anybody's perfect. We have yeshivas in New York that are selling drugs to make money. Are they good people? No. So, I mean, you have no idea, what makes a good person. So I think you just love everybody. You try to be nice to people, and that's what you do.
I would just, one thing that I was thinking of as you said what you said, Etta, was that one of the things that can be beneficial for all of us is to meet with people and genuinely listen to their experience. Someone who's willing to talk to you and tell you about their experience. This is something I experienced for the first time several years ago with a person who is gay and religious, and at first that was something that was hard to even to hold in the same two hands. He's gay and he wants to remain religious. On the other hand, it was so important because to this day that's who he is, and rather than reject him and he wouldn't be religious at all, so he is religious. And there's so much to hear from different people and hear from the different experiences of different people, because you hear one person, you hear one experience. That doesn't mean that that's everyone's experience. And to be able to meet with some people and hear their experience, their difficulties, their hopes, what was positive for them, what was negative for them. And we don't even have to agree with them at the end of of a meeting. We don't have to agree with everything they said. It's not necessarily they know best. They've gone through a certain experience, but certainly then we will have a better awareness of the issues than discussing this amongst people who have not experienced this ourselves.
Okay.
So I'm curious what the group would think about what is society's responsibility when we are talking about a child, when, it's almost become a fad in some parts of society, certainly in the West, in America, that a mother will decide early on that the son that was born to her is a girl and begins to raise the child that way. And there are now states in the United States that have banned these operations on children. There are other states that have said, we'll do it, come here. So at what point do we decide this is child abuse. We need to intervene and protect the child. Curious to see what
That will lead us, I'm looking at the clock as well. That will lead us to a suggestion, to a question and a suggestion. The question is, are there other issues of progressive issues that we've been discussing for about 4 or 5 meetings? Are there other issues that we haven't dealt with? That we haven't shied away from anything. We're not afraid to discuss anything. But are there some progressive issues that we haven't discussed? Those who are with us through this series, are there any other issues that we have not encountered, not discussed? And then, if I may, I will say this in your name, Mark. Mark suggested, and we discussed it, not person to person, but email to email a few hours ago, that maybe the issues, the political issues are an interesting discussion, but not in a political sense, from a religious perspective. In other words, we want tikkun olam, but before we go and reach tikkun olam, we have to start with the state of Israel. And that's where our vote, some of us, our votes can count somewhere else as well, but certainly in the state of Israel. And what is the right way to conduct ourselves religiously in a state that has that's policy is not religious? It's not that the people are not religious. The policy of the state is not religious. The law is not religion, is not Torah on the one hand, and it's Jewish and it's ours on the other hand. And what are the issues? What are the different opinions? Those who, Satmar that totally reject, or Haredim that want to influence but don't want to be part of it, and all kinds of different opinions. That's a suggestion for another issue to discuss in another series coming on up from now. And there, Michael, I would take your question and say, okay, before we influence the United States, what's going to happen in Israel with these issues in the next decade or two? How are we going to, who should we vote for? I mean, we're not going to make decisions on who everybody's going to vote for. I always said, David, I'm absolutely willing to give a shiur on who to vote for. And if you sit through the whole shiur, I will give you the answer at the end. And the answer is going to be, you vote for whoever you decide to vote for. That's the psak. Right. But still, we can discuss the concepts. Should we try to encourage the state to move in this direction or to that direction? That's something that we can consider. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Eliezer.
Of course, I'm all for Mark's idea, but before that, what did we talk about stem cell research?
No, we did not talk about stem cell research. If you have an expert on it, I'd be happy to hear. I'm not knowledgeable about it.
But I was just wondering, that seemed to be in line with what we've been talking about. And
yes,
I was interested in how this group reacts to it. Maybe
I'm not. I don't have experience even of studying or discussing the issue. I would love to hear about it. So if you have a friend who's an expert, and then maybe we can discuss it as a group after we hear 2 different experts with 2 different perspectives, maybe.
I'm not offering myself as an expert, I assure you. But I think we all know that Israel is one of the few places where stem cell research can happen because other countries have an absolute prohibition on it.
Okay.
Thank you.
So thank you, everyone. And
thank you very much.
And we have a topic for 2 weeks from now. Not stem cell.
Lovely big crowd. Help me out.
If you want to discuss stem cell research, please help me. We can try and put something together. Seriously.
Okay.
Okay.
Good night. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Everybody should come next time too.
Yeah.
We'll try. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Excuse me.
Yes.
The reason I asked about that, because there was an article that I think in the States, the FDA or the Food Administration, whatever it is, was banning animal research on the grounds that it can be done better